Well, hey, if you haven't been with us for the last few weeks, we've been in a series that we're calling This Christmas Is, and we're kind of filling in the blank each week as we talk about this Christmas season. And we'll wrap up this series on Tuesday at our Christmas Eve services, and so I hope that you'll be back with us on Tuesday, that you'll invite some friends and some family and make sure that you're here. It's going to be an incredible time. But for the last few weeks, we've been talking about This Christmas Is, and we started this series by filling in the blank with This Christmas is not going as I planned. This Christmas is not what I expected. And so we talked about Christmas from the perspective of Joseph and how he experienced a Christmas that wasn't quite what he had planned. And then following that, Chris last week talked about this Christmas is joyful. And he talked about it from the perspective of the shepherds and how all of us can find joy in this Christmas season if we find our joy in the right place, which is the person of Jesus. And so this morning, I'm going to continue in that series, and we're going to talk about a word. We're going to fill in the blank with a word that I think is applicable to all of us as we think about the Christmas season. And the word is simply this: it's stressful. This Christmas is stressful. Would anyone agree with that statement this morning? This Christmas is stressful. Yeah. I feel like the reason that we could all say that this is a stressful season for us is because we're all really busy. And this isn't just a Christmas thing. This is like a life thing, right? Like we are busier now as a country and as a people than we have ever been in any generation past. We are just really, really, really busy people. Has anyone noticed that busy is the new fine? Have you noticed that? Like back in the day, you used to ask people, hey, how you doing? And they'd say, I'm fine. Now you ask people, hey, how you doing? They go, I'm busy. Exactly. I'm really busy, but things are good. Or I'm really busy and I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I'm really busy. We're all really, really busy, and we're no exception to that. My wife and I, as we think about the last year of our life, it has been really, really busy. I just want you to imagine this power strip as, let's just say, my life and your life for this year. And these are all of the things that we have going on. It's been a really busy year. We decided this year that we're going to start a nonprofit. And so my wife and I started this nonprofit for college students where we've been doing service-based conferences. We had about 600 college students show up to our first ever conference and organize service projects at 19 different nonprofits throughout their community. And so we're trying to figure out how to do all of that, and it's caused us to be really busy as we're figuring out all those details. I started here at Mountain Lake, and so learning the staff and learning the culture and trying to remember everyone's name. You know, it's really not fair when you go to a place and you're the new person because they have one name to remember and you have 50 names to remember, right? And so they're like, hey, Gerald, and I'm like, hey, you, it's so good to see you, right? I love you so much. Sean, who is that again? What was their name? Right, like, and so you're trying to figure all that out, and so that's kept us really busy. My wife, she also started a new job this year. She's working at this place called the Faith Center in Alpharetta, which if you've never been, it is absolutely incredible. You have to go and check it out. They have like a co-working space in the middle, an event space on one side, and on the other side they have after school and daycare, and my wife is the after-school director there, but this is her first time doing something like this, and so she's trying to figure out, like, how do I build an after-school program, and how do I get more kids to attend, and how do I plan camps, because she's over camps as well, and so Thanksgiving camp, and Christmas camp, and summer camp, and so she's trying to figure all that out, and that's making us really busy. And then on top of that, we found out earlier this year that we're pregnant. Thanks. It's awesome. Yeah, and then we found out that they were twins, right? And then we found out that they were girls. Yeah. So pray for me, because at some point I'm going to drop kick some little 15-year-old boy in the throat. Ever look at my daughter like that again, okay? Thank you very much. God might forgive you. I don't. I'll kill you. So if your kid is in the babies area right now, sorry, that might be your son that I kick in the face. So that was not in my notes. Sometimes I just get myself, right? And so we just found out that we're pregnant with identical twin girls, and we're really excited about that. We also just bought a house, which is kind of wild. You know, they say you should have like one major change in a year, and but we just bought our first house, and it's kind of crazy to think about because, like, I'm the first person in my immediate family to ever own a house. And so like I remember my mom growing up, like bouncing around from apartment to apartment, and she just had this dream to one day put us in a home, and she wasn't able to ever quite get there. And so thinking about my little girls and the house that we're going to grow up in together is just super, super sweet. But it's also making things really busy, primarily because my wife watches a lot of HGTV. And so I walk into a house and I see a house. She walks into a house and she says, that wall has to go. That window needs to be one window. Tell them to fill that up. That door needs to move. We can just move the door. Translation, just move the door, ladies. I don't know if you realize this. For a man, that means I have to go Google how do we move a door. Then I have to find a contractor and pay this contractor my life savings so we can just move the door. So we moved the door, but we're renovating the house right now, and that's amazing, and it's awesome, but it's all keeping us really, really busy. And so when I think about my life and I think about the way that things are just really busy for us. Now, here's what I know is happening in the room right now. There's a college student who's home from break, and you're looking at my life and you're going, you have no idea what busy is, bro. I'll tell you busy, okay? I go to school Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I have no idea. I go to school Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I have an internship on Tuesday and Thursday. It's an unpaid internship because they know I'm a college student. They don't have to pay me, and I have to do it for school credit. I have work because I don't get paid for my internship, and I don't get paid to go to school. And I'm a broke college student, so I have to make money, and so I have to work on the weekends. And so every day of my week is taken by something. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, school. Tuesday, Thursday, internship, work on the weekends. But then I have friends, and all my friends want to hang out with me, and I'm trying to figure out when I have time to hang out with my friends, but I can't make time for my friends because I have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and she always wants to hang out with me, and they always want to hang out with me. And she's like, you don't spend enough time with me. And they're like, bro, you're supposed to hang out with us before her. And I'm like, I don't know what to do because I'm trying to make time for her and I'm trying to make time for them. And I got work and I got school and I got an internship that I'm all trying to do. And my parents are always wanting me to come home. They're like, come home, come home, come home. We miss you so much. And I'm like, I don't want to come home, but I have to come home because you pay for me to go to college. And I'm also trying to keep my hope up because if I don't keep hope, then my parents won't want me to come home. They'll be like, you keep your butt over there and figure out how you're going to pay for school. And so I'm trying to keep hope. And I have extramurals and I have intramurals and I'm trying to do all of that. And I'm working out because if I don't work out, they say it's a freshman 15, but that was a lie. It's like a freshman 15 and then a sophomore 30 and then a junior 45. And by the time I'm a senior, I'm like two people in one body. I don't know how this happened. And then there's college football and I'm trying to keep up with that. And then I have Snapchat because all my friends are snapping me. And if I don't keep my streaks alive, then our friendship ends. And so I don't know what to do with that. Then I have Instagram. And my Instagram has to be perfect. And it has to all have the same filter because if not, then people won't follow me. And I don't know what to do with that. And I have to build my resume. And my resume has to be perfect. And it has to have all the right internships and prove that I'm an active citizen in the world and that I can handle a job. And on top of all of that, I have to do it and graduate in 4 years. I need like an oxygen mask up here right now. If you're a college student, like you don't know busy. I'm busy. But then there's parents in the room. And they're like, you idiot. You think you're busy now with your classes and your job? I work like a real job. Like 9 to 5, usually 9 to 6 every day. Then I get home from work and I open up my mailbox. And when I open my mailbox, guess what's in it? It's not care packages, what you get in college, okay? It's this thing. It's called bills. It's not a person, it's a thing that I have to pay. And I don't just have to pay mine, I also have to pay yours. And as soon as I finish paying my bills, then there's more bills. And I finish paying those bills, and then there's more bills. And I'm looking around the house and I have all these bills. And so I put them in a pile, and I try to throw all those away. And as soon as I put those away, I realize, oh my gosh, my house is a mess. I gotta clean up the whole house. And so I start cleaning up the house, but I can never finish cleaning the house because my kids come to me and they go, hey dad, will you take me to school? Hey mom, will you take me to sports? And then I hang out with friends, and then to work, and then to the movies. And if you have little kids, then you have bath time. And so you bathe them and you put them in bed, and you have bedtime and you read them a story and you're like, great, I can get a moment to myself. But as soon as you put them to bed, 3 seconds later, they get out of bed and they go, Mommy, I'm thirsty. And so you're like, okay, fine, here's some water. And you give them some water and they're like, no, I wanted milk. And so you give them some milk and then they drink the milk and then they lay down. They're supposed to go to sleep and then they get back up and they go, I have to pee, which I guess makes sense because you just had milk and water. And so they go to the bathroom and you're like, oh, I just need a moment. And then you think when they get older, it'll end. But when they get older, then you have homecoming and prom and graduations and SATs and college visits, and you're trying to do all of that, and your car breaks down in the middle of it. So you take your car to Corey's, but you get to Corey's and you realize everyone takes their car to Corey's, and so there's no space for you. And so you're waiting for your car to get fixed, and you're trying to figure out how to move the kids around. And at the same time, you're expected to have an Instagram so you know what's going on in your kid's life, because if you don't have an Instagram, then you're an irrelevant person. But if you don't have Instagram, but you don't really want to be on Instagram, you really want to be on Facebook because that's where all your friends are. And then as an adult, you're supposed to have a LinkedIn, but you don't even know what to do with the LinkedIn. You just have one because you're supposed to have one. And on top of that, you have a husband or wife who wants to spend time with you. And you're like, how? You're busy. And here's the thing. I don't know what stage of life you are in the room right now. But if we had enough humility to sit across from the other person and really listen, I think what we would find is that we're all really busy. That our culture pushes us towards busyness. And then you add the holidays to the mix, right? And you have presents that you have to buy. You have dinner that you have to make. You have a house that needs to be cleaned before people come over. You have family members that you have to go visit. Family members that are coming to visit you. Relatives that you want to see. Relatives you don't really want to see. Work stuff to wrap up. You try to get to the end of the year and think about the happy things, but you also know that tax season is on the way, and so you start thinking, did I keep all the receipts that I was supposed to keep? And the busyness of the season, the lights that need to be hung, the decorations that need to be put out, it starts to weigh on us, and the stress begins to rise. And we find ourselves extremely stressed out in what's meant to be the most wonderful time of the year. Now, for most of us, we hear that and we go, yeah, Gerald, that's the way that life works. Like, that's every Christmas. Christmas is just a stressful time. We have the busyness of life, and the holidays get added to it, and of course, we're just busy, we're tired, we're stressed, and that's just the way that it works. It's become so normal to us that we don't even think it's a problem. But I want to talk about it this morning because I think it is a problem. In fact, I think it's a really big problem. Because for a lot of us, what's happening is that we find ourselves so busy, we find ourselves checking off the list, we find ourselves getting everything done, getting everything organized, trying to make everything work together, that we check off everything on the list, but we miss the moments that matter most. And it's not that we weren't there. It wasn't that we weren't at the event. It wasn't that we weren't in the living room when they opened the presents. We were there for the event, we just missed the moment. We couldn't enjoy it fully because our mind was on the next thing that needed to be done. But if that's not bad enough, it's not that we're just missing the moment, it's that we're missing God in the moment. Because it may be in that moment that God is wanting to use to teach you something for the future. It might be in that moment that God is wanting to speak to you and show you a little bit more of who He is. It might be in that moment that God is trying to answer a prayer that you have been praying for a very long time, and we end up missing the moment because we're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. We have so much to do, we're so busy, and we're so stressed that we miss the moments that matter the most. And so the question for this morning is really, really simple. It's this, it's how do we not miss the moment? With the busyness and the chaos of this season, how do we be intentional to not miss the moment? To answer that question, I want to take a look at the Christmas story again, but I want to look at it from the perspective of Mary. Because I think when we think about Christmas, we imagine the beauty of it, but we forget that Mary was a real person and that first Christmas was probably really stressful for her. I think we all have a tendency when we read the scriptures, we kind of pull the humanity out of the text and we read the Bible as if the people that we're reading about are superheroes who felt nothing and everything just went right for them. And when they messed up, they just figured it out and they kept moving. But the reality is that these were real life people, including Jesus, who felt what we felt, who experienced busyness and stress and trials and worries just like we did. And so when we think about Christmas and we imagine this beautiful manger scene where Jesus is dressed in gold and all the sheep and donkeys and camels are perfectly behaved and the wise men were there even though they weren't really there, like Chris taught us last week. We imagine this perfect scene, but the reality is for Mary is that Christmas probably looked a lot more like this. That first Christmas was very, very stressful. I mean, really think about it for a moment. Like, go back to the beginning of the story for Mary. 15-year-old, 14-year-old girl, just trying to be the best little Jewish girl that she can be, minding her own business, when an angel appears and she's like, whoa, who are you? She's freaking out. And Gabriel goes, no, you don't have to worry, it's me, I'm Gabriel. I came to bring you really good news. You're actually going to give birth to a little boy. Mary's like, Gabriel, I know you're like from heaven, so you don't really understand the way that things work like on earth. There's this thing called birds and bees. And the birds and the bees thing isn't happening over here. So ain't no baby is happening with this one. And Gabriel's like, no, you don't understand. Okay. It's God's baby that you're going to have. Can you imagine the stress and the weight and the responsibility that a 14-year-old little girl would have finding out that she was going to give birth to a baby and the baby was going to be God? But it gets worse. Because now she has to tell her fiance. And so she walks over to Joseph's house, I imagine. She's like, hey, Joe. I know they call you Joseph, but you my boo. Come on, Joe. Hey. So really exciting news. You know how there's like birds, and then there's like bees, and then there's like the birds and the bees. You know how that works? Yeah. I'm pregnant. I'm having a baby. It's God's. And Joseph is like, Mary, that's the story you're going with? It's God's baby? You're trying to tell me it's not Steve's? I see the way that Steve looks at you. You're telling me it's God's baby? Joseph plans to leave Mary quietly, but an angel comes to Joseph in a dream and tells him that he has to stick around, that Mary's telling the truth. So Joseph decides to stick around. But can you imagine the stress of a 14-year-old girl going to her future husband and explaining to him that there's a baby on the way and the baby belongs to God? Can you imagine how stressful that would have been? Well, Joseph sticks around and everything's going well until they find out that the census is happening. And the census would require them to travel back to the hometown of Joseph's family. It's kind of where we pick up in the text. It's Luke chapter 2, starting in verse 4. It says this. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He was there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Now you read that, and it just sounds so beautiful. Mary and Joseph travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. They get there, and it's time for the baby to be born. So they find this manger, and they place him in it. They're like, look, it's Jesus. Can I explain to you what's actually happening here? 9 months pregnant, Mary gets news that she has to travel from one town to another. A lot of scholars would say that the travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem was a 90-mile travel, but because of the terrain and because of how pregnant Mary was, she wouldn't have been able to make the journey in one day. So it would have been 10 miles a day for 9 days in a row, probably on camel or donkey. And so they're making this long travel, 90 miles, 10 days in a row, or 9 days in a row, 10 miles a day. And they would say that around that time, it would have been winter for them. So temperatures were probably in the 30s, and it would be their rainy season, so likely it rained on some of the days. And so here you have a 9-month pregnant woman on a donkey or camel, traveling 10 miles a day, 9 days in a row, in rain and cold, just so she can get to Bethlehem to find out that Joe was just like a lot of the guys in the room. Procrastinator. Waiting until the last minute. Oh, it'll be fine. Mary, we'll be good. There's a Holiday Inn, it'll be fine. If the Holiday Inn's full, surely the La Quinta will have some space for us. Worst case, Mary, will end up at a Super 8. Like, everything will be good. And so they make this journey, and they show up in the town, and the Holiday Inn is full, the La Quinta is full, and the Super 8 says no vacancy. Can you imagine how stressful this would be? 9 months pregnant, having traveled 9 days, 10 days in a row, to show up in the town to find out that there's nowhere for you to stay, and so you end up in a cave that's attached to the inn. And the cave would have been used as a place to house the donkeys and the sheep, the loudest and dirtiest animals in their day. Contractions, screaming, animals making noise, the smell unbearable. And this was the humble birth of our Savior. It's a whole nother sermon for another time, but can you imagine how Mary would have felt in that moment? That this would be the place that she would give birth to the Son of God. And if that wasn't bad enough, if it wasn't already stressful, the angels would go to the field and tell the shepherds, hey, Jesus was born. And then they give them GPS directions. And so the shepherds put it in Waze and show up to the manger. Now, I don't know what the days leading up to Christmas are like for you, but in my house, when people were coming over, my mom lost her mind. Like a completely different human. We're like cleaning things that we've never used before. We have china that I've never seen. I'm like, did you fly to China and get china and bring it back for this? Like, what in the world is happening? Because we all know when people are coming over, you want everything clean, you want everything spotless, because your mother-in-law will notice that you did not dust the ceiling fan. So imagine for Mary, guests coming over, and she can't even host them appropriately. The stress of this season would have been unbearable. But the way that she responds blows my mind. Like, as I read through the Christmas story, Luke writes this one sentence in the middle of the story that really makes no sense to me. And I've looked over it over and over and over again, but this Christmas, it really stood out. This Christmas, it really had significance. This Christmas, it really showed me that Mary was unlike many of us. And she did something that I hope most of us would do. It says this, Luke chapter 2, verse 19. It says, but Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. That in the middle of the busyness, in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of the stress, in the middle of a Christmas that was not what she imagined, in the middle of things not going the way that she planned, that she paused for long enough to treasure these things and ponder them in her heart. That Mary somehow, in the middle of all of this, was able to disconnect and look at what was happening. To disconnect and see what was actually going on around her. That Mary was able to unplug in the middle of the stress so that she wouldn't miss the moment that mattered most. When she did three things. Three things that I would challenge us to do this Christmas season. Three things that I think would make all of the difference if we decided to do them in the next few days. The first thing that Mary did was this, is that she looked for what God was doing. She looked for what God was doing. I just imagine that as Mary is sitting in this cave with all of these shepherds and wise men traveling on the way, I just imagine that as she's sitting there, she has this moment where she goes, I can't believe that God used me like this. I can't believe what God has done in me and through me. I can't believe that I get to be a part of this moment. And while she could have been frustrated that things weren't done correctly, while she could have been mad at Joseph for not having a place for them to stay, while she could have been annoyed that she had to travel in the rain 90 miles from her hometown, instead of all of that, she disconnects for just long enough to go look at what God is doing. I just wonder what that would look like for us. What it would look like in the middle of a busy season for us to slow down for long enough and just unplug momentarily so that we could look around and go, I can't believe what God has done. I can't believe what he's doing right now. I can't believe the way he's worked in me this year. I can't believe the way he's worked in my husband or the way he's worked in my wife. I can't believe what he's done for our family this year. To slow down for long enough and just look for what God has already done and look for what God is currently doing. Mary does this, but she doesn't stop there. The next thing that she does is she treasures the moment. She soaks it all in. She realizes that maybe this moment, not maybe, that this moment will never happen again for her. That the moment that she is sitting in right now will never take place again in history. And so instead of thinking about what's next, instead of worrying about what happened, she soaks in all of the moment. And she puts it in a place that she'd never forget it. And I just wonder what treasuring looks like for you this year. Because the reality of this Christmas is that next Christmas may not look like it. The reality of this Christmas is that while you have all your little kids in one place and you're able to run down the stairs early on Christmas morning and celebrate together, that eventually they're going to go to college, and then they'll get married, and they'll have families of their own, and everyone will be running around to different places, and you may never have all of your kids together in one place at the same time. And so I wonder what it looks like to go, I know, there's a lot going on. Things are really busy. It's not going the way that I planned. It's really, really stressful, but there's something happening in this moment, and I don't want to miss it. So I'm going to treasure it, and I'm going to bring it in close. And I'm going to soak it all in, because I don't want to forget what God has done. And then the last thing that Mary does is it says she's pondered these things in her heart. That she pondered these things in the heart. Another translation said that she thought of these things often. So the third thing that Mary does is after she's soaked in these moments, after she's treasured them within her, she reminds herself often of what God has done. She reminds herself often of the moment that she got to be a part of. She reminds herself often of the way that God moved in her life and in her story. And I think for me, at least, I need to be reminded to do the same. Because there are days that I wake up and I just want to give up. There are days that I wake up and I go, God, I thought you were good, but I don't see it right now. There are days that I wake up and I just want to give up on life, and I'm just tired of trying, and I don't want to do the checklist anymore, and I don't feel like going further. And it's on those days that I need to be reminded of how good and how faithful God is. It's on those days that I need to slow down and remember the weekend that Kylie and I went up to a cabin over a year ago and prayed specifically for twins. And now every time I look at her stomach, I remember God is good and he is faithful. I need to slow down and remember the nights where my mom stood in our apartment crying because she couldn't provide for me in the way that she wanted to, and now looking that God has allowed me to provide for my kids in a way that she never could for me. I need to slow down and remember the person that I was before I knew Jesus and the road that I was on, and now where God has taken me and the way that he is using me. Here's the thing. God isn't like a genie that just gives you whatever you want, but God does show up and he does move and he does work in our lives even when we can't see it. And if we don't slow down for long enough to see what he is doing, if we don't slow down for long enough to look for what he has done, if we don't slow down for long enough to remember the way that he showed up in the past, then we will miss the moments that God has laid out for us. And so Mary not wanting to miss the moment. She looks for what God is doing. She treasures the moment. And she thinks about it often. She gets to be a part of what God has done in the world. I think that same opportunity is on the table for us. To look for what God is doing this season, to treasure the moment in your heart, and to think about it often. Now, here's the thing. You may hear that and think, that's like a long process. There's a lot to do there. And I'm not saying that you need to go off to a cabin for 7 days and reflect on the year. That would be awesome if you have time to do that. I'm not saying that this needs to be hours and hours and hours of reflection. I'm just saying, could you take 5 minutes in the morning, wake up a little bit earlier, spend some time with the Lord, look for what he's done, treasure the moments in your heart, and think about how good he is? Could you find 30 seconds, maybe while your kids are opening presents, to disconnect from the to-do list and all the stuff that you have to do and just be present in the moment and soak in the joy in their face and in their heart and treasure it and think about how blessed you are to have a family? Could you maybe in your shower at the end of a day just spend some time remembering, decompressing, evaluating the day and going, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize God showed up in that conversation. God showed up at that meal. God showed up in my day-to-day, and I'm just going to take a second in the shower and treasure that moment. I don't want to forget it. I want to store it in a place that I will always remember it, and I'm going to think about it often, because on the days that I want to give up, on the days that I have questions, on the days where I wonder if God is really good, these memories will remind me that I can trust him and that he's faithful. It doesn't take hours. It doesn't take weeks. It just takes a moment to disconnect, to look for what God is doing, to treasure the moment, and to think of it often. I was having a quiet time a little bit ago. I was just reading through the scriptures. I was studying through Philippians at the time. I was also preparing for this message, and so I was thinking about Mary and the way that she responded to the stress of the season and everything that was going on in her life. And as I was reading through the end of Philippians, through the end of this letter that Paul wrote, I stumbled across these words. Philippians 4:8 says this. It says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And I read that and I thought, man, Paul is telling us to do exactly what Mary did. He said, hey, in the busyness of life, with everything that you have going on, with all of the things that you have to do, I want you to pause for long enough to think about things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. I want you to think about those kind of things. Because as you think about them, they will remind you of the goodness and the faithfulness of your God, and they will propel you forward to continue to follow him and trust him even when things get difficult. And so that morning, I just opened up my journal and I did something that I would challenge you to do. This is kind of your homework assignment for the end of this sermon. I walked through this passage and I just wrote all of the words that Paul mentioned. True, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. I wrote those words down and just wrote a line right next to them. And I began to write about my own life. What are the things that are true? What are the things that are noble? What are the things that are right? What are the things that are pure? What are the things that are lovely? What are the things that are admirable? What's excellent and what's praiseworthy? And every week, I start my week by reading through this list again. Because I want to think about these things often. I want to remind myself that God is good, that he shows up in our mess, that he is not too perfect to meet us right where we are. So my challenge to you this week is maybe write out a list of your own. What's pure? What's right? What's true? What's lovely? What's admirable? What's excellent in your life? And think about those things often. And allow God to remind you that you can trust him, that he's good, that he's faithful. Now here's what I know about us, because it's true about me. Did you hear a message like that? And you're like, yeah, I should write a list like that, or I should think about those things. But the reality is you'll walk out of these doors, and your checklist will come back to mind. And you'll realize, I still have to drive down to the Avalon and sit in this traffic because I haven't bought presents yet. You'll realize that there's stuff around the house that needs to be done. There's things for Thanksgiving, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. There's things for Christmas dinner that haven't been bought yet. And you'll start thinking about these things, and this message will fade to the back of your mind. And so instead of making you do this at home or challenging you to do this at home, we just thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we just gave you some space right now to look at what God has done, to maybe treasure some of the moments that have already happened this season in your heart, and to think about the goodness of God. And so I asked the guys if they would come out and sing one more song. We're actually going to sing a couple and do communion. But for this first song, I just wanted to give you a moment to look for what God has done in your life, to treasure and to think. So they're going to play the song, and I just want to give you space to respond the way that you need to. For some of you, that may mean that you want to stand and worship, and that's totally fine. For some of you, that may mean that you want to flip over your bulletin and write notes on the back and maybe start writing that list. What's right? What's pure? What's excellent in my life? And write those things down. For some of you, it's just sitting and praying and telling God thank you for what he's already done. Maybe it's praying with your spouse and you haven't had a chance to do that in a really long time. Maybe it's a conversation that you need to turn to the person next to you and have for the next few minutes. Whatever it is for you, we just wanted to give you some space. Because we don't want to be people who miss the moment. You see, there's beauty in our busyness. There's a savior in our stress. There's treasure in the turmoil. And there's hope for all of us. I don't want to miss the moment. I don't want you to either. So I'm going to pray for you. We're going to sing this song. And just take a minute to look for what God has done for you. Father, thank you for the opportunity that you've given us. One, just to gather in a place like this. We don't take that for granted. Thank you for the truth of your word. Thank you for the example that Mary set for all of us at such a young age. That in the busyness of life and the stress of this world, with all that was thrown at her that she was not expecting, to pause for long enough to treasure the moments in her heart, to ponder them, to think of them often. God, thank you for that example. I just pray that you would help us to do the same. And so in these next few minutes, would you erase from our mind all of the things that need to be done, all of the places that we have to go, all the people that we need to talk to? And would just for a few minutes, would you allow us to put our attention and our focus on you? Would you bring to our mind memories of the way that you've shown up in the past year? Would you bring to our mind moments that we should treasure? Would you remind us of your faithfulness and your goodness? And would all of that propel us into this next year to be a people who would continue to follow you and love you with all that we have? Thanks for being bigger than we could ever imagine or think. And thanks for being a place that we can ultimately rest. We love you and we thank you. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. And everyone said together real loud, amen.